There's a reason why you see anime with anti-hero protagonists show up in a lot of people's top 10 lists, and you may even have one in your own top list. It's probably because these anti-heroes break the mold and idea that the main protagonist should be 100% good and moral. Instead, these kinds of characters disrupt the notion of what a conventional hero is supposed to do. They are not in the story to be your usual good cookie-cutter friends or forever protags that you commonly see in shonen anime or in general. But that's also what makes anti-heroes so captivating to watch and what makes the story so interesting. Anti-protagonists can be unpredictable because they act according to their own scale of morality and what they believe to be good or right for them in a given situation. So let's break down the different kinds of anti-heroes that we see in anime and what makes them so dope. I'm your narrator MK, and as per usual, let's throw out some general definitions. An anti-hero refers to a story's protagonist who lacks the conventional heroic traits like courage, morality, and selflessness. Anti-heroes usually have a dark side to the personality and can be dishonest or aggressive. They often have their own sense of justice and act in unethical ways for a certain idealism that they believe in or subscribe to. I like to think of anti-heroes and their morality as if on a spectrum. In anime, we got anti-heroes like Light Yagami from Death Note, who wants to become the god of the new world, even if that means manipulating and killing literally anyone who gets in his way. But then we have protags like Revy from Black Lagoon or Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. Spike is a reformed criminal that doesn't really care about anything and definitely not the people and environment around him when it comes to getting a bounty. And even though he shows that he has capacity for compassion, he is still largely apathetic. Characters like Spike and Revy are morally gray characters, but nowhere near on the same level of self-righteousness as someone like Light Yagami, or say Lelouch v. Britannia from Code Geass, who has strong motivations to overthrow an entire empire and everyone who opposes him be damned if they get in his way. Some protagonists you can tell off the bat if they're an anti-hero, but others not so much. But if you ever find yourself asking if what the main character is doing is right or fair, chances are that main character is probably an anti-hero. If I had to label and categorize anti-heroes, I would put them on a spectrum. On one side, you have characters who are morally corrupt to the point of being evil, and on the other side, you have characters who are more morally ambiguous, whose actions are questionable but who still show love and care for their friends and loved ones. Now, where I place these characters on this hypothetical spectrum is going to be different from how you or anyone else place these characters. In my opinion, characters on the morally corrupt side have no shot of redemption, do not want to be redeemed, and would rather die than to show any kind of compromise on their end goals. And even though some of their actions will still shock and surprise you, you can still count on them being unethical or just downright evil. Characters on this side have no qualms about killing people or using anyone, including their friends or family, as pawns in their plans. These kinds of anti-heroes are manipulative, probably live some kind of double life, and have a god complex. Prime example is none other than Light Yagami. When I think of an anti-hero, he's the first one that comes to mind. From the jump, we know what kind of protagonist Light is. An intelligent and self-righteous person who doesn't mind sacrificing his own soul and morality, if he had any to begin with, in his attempt to create a new world where only he gets to pass judgment on the wicked. Light might have been an upstanding citizen if he never found a death note, but as it is, he grows greedy for more power, and any moral foundation that he had withers away as he begins killing innocents who've done nothing wrong. To me, there's no redemption for Light, and I have to admit that I loved seeing his demise at the end of the story. Seeing him desperate and being undone was a pretty great tragic ending for this guy who became the villain to his own story, the villain protagonist. So if I see you have Light Yagami as one of your favorite anime characters, you're low-key sus as to me. Also, do you need a hug? All that aside, I think what makes Death Note great is us, the viewer, being able to vicariously see Light trying to accomplish his goals by these sadistic means. He wanted to create a new world by killing the scum of society, but more importantly, he didn't want to get caught because he knew that murdering people was wrong. But by far, my favorite part is seeing him die. I'll rewatch the whole thing just to watch him die. Shit, maybe I'm a little sadistic too. I think two other great anti-heroes that are extremely popular are the Attack Titan himself, Eren Yeager, and Lelouch v. Britannia. The thing that Code Geass does which Death Note does not is the way it humanizes Lelouch. Although he wants to overthrow his father's empire through very manipulative means, and the first chance he gets at real power he tells a whole platoon of soldiers to kill themselves, Lelouch does have some redeeming qualities as a person for what it's worth. He has a big soft spot for his little sister Nunnally, and he cares deeply for his friends and close comrades. You see him internally struggle every time he has to go head to head with his childhood best friend Suzaku. And when he realizes he's the reason Shirley's father died, I seriously thought Lelouch would be like, well, there will be casualties and you ain't bae, so. But instead, I'm so glad we saw him doubt his quest for revenge, his sense of justice, his morality, and himself. And even though he doesn't falter from his ultimate goal, it's just good characterization seeing him struggle with the decisions he's made. Another great way that Code Geass humanizes Lelouch as a character is through flashbacks showing what happened to him as a child, walking through a graveyard of corpses with Suzaku and Nunnally, and seeing his mother dead in front of him. And here we understand what kind of world he came from and the circumstances that made him the way he is. This all helps us sympathize with him and understand his contempt. In Death Note, you don't see this at all in the case of Light Yagami, and I think that's on purpose, and it's supposed to be more upfront and obvious just how wicked and corrupt he is. Light don't care about his little sister. In Death Note, I think it's easier to want to see Light fail than to want to see Lelouch fail. That's why I wouldn't put Lelouch on the farther side of my anti-hero spectrum, and that's why I think Code Geass and Lelouch end up in people's top list too. Despite using his own friends as bait and sacrificing literal battalions of soldiers for his cause, not to mention constantly lying and leading a double life like Light, you still want to see Lelouch win and accomplish his goal, which he does, and we're rewarded because what Lelouch did in the end was break the cycle of hatred of the world by making himself the enemy of the world and sacrificing his own life and other desires. And speaking of becoming the enemy of the world, one character we didn't see turning into an anti-hero right away is Eren Yeager. Like it or not, you simps, Eren is definitely an anti-hero, but that's what's amazing about the story of Attack on Titan is that we get to see Eren's evolution as a protagonist who becomes the anti-protagonist because of his circumstances and the burden of the knowledge that he holds. Throughout the whole story, you're rooting for Eren. You see what he went through as a child and you want him to kill those Titans and the warriors and Marley.
I've had it with these
Titans.
on this plane.
But of course the story is much more complex than that. The turning point for me when I started hating Eren as a character and stopped rooting for him was when he told Mikasa that he always hated her and that she's a slave. But make no mistake, that just means that Eren is a great anti-hero slash villain if he's able to evoke that kind of emotion. In his quest for revenge, truth, and freedom, Eren definitely lost a part of himself. He did to Marley what they did to his hometown with no qualms or reservations about his actions. For his end goal, he was willing to sacrifice lives, turn on his friends, and become something he hated. Now we can argue day and night about Eren's true intentions and if the rumbling was the best option or not, but with these anti-hero types, you have to ask yourself the same thing. Does the end really justify the means? And in their quest to create an ideal world that cannot exist, these characters and these stories turn into tragedies. I love this aspect of anti-heroes so much that I'm actually working on a whole separate video diving deep into the topic of the tragedy of anti-heroes, where I compare and analyze Light, Eren, and Lelouch and their stories, including the philosophies around freedom, justice, truth, and hatred. So if you want to see that, please subscribe and stay tuned. In the meantime, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have the morally ambiguous anti-heroes who are more or less a product of their past and their environment. Characters like Revi, Spike, and Hive from Darker Than Black seemingly had less of a choice in the trajectory of their lives and more so committed injustices or fell into a life of crime because it meant their survival or it was the only thing they knew or there was someone or something they had to protect. This can definitely be debated, but let's look at femme fatale Revi from Black Lagoon as an example. A victim of assault and abuse, Revi learned two things at a very young age. Power will get you farther in life than love or God, and as long as you have money and guns, you're sure to survive. Revi did what she had to in order to survive. A classic product of her environment, it's no surprise she ended up as a skilled and deadly marksman. She will murder anyone who even provokes her in the slightest. In short, she's got some issues, but we also see her develop as a character in the series. She grows to have a soft spot for Rock, and even though she's almost killed him a few times, she also rescues him and actually cares about him. I personally love Revi in spite of her baggage. She's a badass, fun to watch, and extremely likable. Characters on this side of the spectrum are deeply troubled and haunted by their past in a way that garners a lot of sympathy and relatability. These characters are not setting out to change or create an ideal world, but rather they have accepted how nihilistic the world they exist in can be and have chosen their own path and method of how to navigate in that world. Hai, Spike, and Revi are jaded, but the beautiful thing about them is that they keep striving despite the shittiness around them. They may live for themselves and act out of self-interest, but there's always something or someone they care about. They can't be 100% good, courageous, and moral because they're just humans, and humans make mistakes and falter and stumble, but always keep it pushing. I tend to like characters on this side of the spectrum more because I think I can relate to them in a more realistic way and I can find more reasons to justify their actions. As a recap, here's my general guide to identifying the morality spectrum. Be aware that these may overlap depending on the anti-hero. And if you're still here watching this video, I want you to please comment below telling me who is your favorite anti-hero in anime or manga, why you love them, and where you think they would fall on this spectrum. I'm genuinely curious, and maybe I'll check some out. I know there's a ton I didn't get to mention. Guts for one from Berserk because I never read it, but I'm definitely planning to. And while we're here, I do hope you consider subscribing. I have a lot of ideas and plans to grow this channel and put out more content this year, and I'd love to have you around. Feel free to drop a topic you'd like to see me cover. Thanks so much for chatting with me. You're dope. I'm your narrator, MK, and stay tuned for more content more often. See ya.